U.S. drone and what the Pentagon is calling an unprovoked attack. The Pentagon says the drone was flying in international airspace over the Strait of Hormuz when an Iranian missile hit it.
June 20th, 2019, Iranian forces shot down a U.S. drone claiming it had entered their airspace. The Pentagon pushed for retaliation. Fighter jets were scrambled, bombers took off, and then, minutes before impact, the strike is called off. A billionaire didn't just buy influence, he nearly bought a war. How did we get this close, and who paid for it? In the United States, money isn't just part of politics, it is politics. Just 1 year ago in 2024, 100 billionaire families spent a staggering $2.6 billion influencing federal elections. That's more than double what they spent 4 years earlier. Think about that. 100 families, roughly the population of a single suburban street, outspent millions of ordinary Americans combined. A little Supreme Court ruling in 2010 called Citizens United v. FEC opened those floodgates. Overnight, corporations and billionaires gained the ability to spend unlimited sums on political campaigns, so long as they did it indirectly, through super PACs and nonprofits. Super PACs can raise unlimited money and spend it to support candidates. They can't directly coordinate with campaigns, but in practice, the line is paper thin. 501c4 nonprofits, so-called social welfare organizations, can pour money into politics too, and they don't even have to disclose who their donors are. That's where the phrase dark money comes from. The resulting chaos is that politics has become an auction house. But most billionaires don't stop at buying politicians, some buy policy itself. This isn't exactly a new trend though. Various leaders have been warning us about it for decades. In 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, himself a five-star general, delivered his farewell address in which he cautioned against what he called the military-industrial complex, a powerful alliance between defense industries, politicians, and the military establishment that could acquire, in his words, unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought. He warned that democracy itself could be at risk if we allowed private profit to dictate public policy. Fast forward 60 years to 2023, and the world's top 100 arms companies raked in $632 billion in revenue. Eisenhower's words feel less like a warning and more like prophecy. Wars are tragedies for most of us, but for a select few, they're also profitable. The polite term is defense contracting. The blunt term is war profiteering, and this is where it stops being a slogan and becomes very real. Take Halliburton and its former subsidiary Kellogg, Brown & Root. During the Iraq War, Halliburton secured $39.5 billion in government contracts. Some of those contracts were awarded under no-bid rules, meaning they didn't even have to compete for them. Investigations later found inflated costs, unsafe practices, and services billed at outrageous rates. One infamous example was soldiers were charged nearly $100 to have a bag of laundry cleaned under Halliburton's contracts. Even smaller scandals reveal the pattern: cost-plus contracts that literally rewarded contractors for spending more. The more they charged, the bigger their profit margins. Inefficiency wasn't punished, it was profitable. And that profit would soon fund something much bigger. Enter Mr. X, our villain, or more safely said, our composite villain. Mr. X is not one person, but a carefully stitched together character built from real American billionaires who used their fortunes to shape US foreign policy. By blending them into one figure, we can see the full picture: the money, the ideology, and the sheer audacity of trying to bend a superpower towards war. Mr. X's wealth comes from three pillars: casinos, oil services, and defense tech. Each industry is lucrative in peacetime, but tied directly to conflict in wartime. First, casinos. Like Sheldon Adelson, who built the Las Vegas Sands empire into a $30 billion fortune at its peak, gave him the cash flow to bankroll entire presidential campaigns. To him, politics was another high-stakes table. Only instead of chips, the bets were measured in millions of dollars, and the payoff was policy rather than money. In oil services, think about Halliburton, the oil field services giant that pulled in $39.5 billion in contracts during the Iraq War. Its former CEO was Dick Cheney, who became Vice President of the United States just before that war began. And last but not least, defense tech, the modern wave of tech billionaires getting into the arms business. Take Palmer Luckey, best known for inventing the Oculus VR headset, whose defense startup Anduril ballooned to an $8 billion valuation by selling AI-driven surveillance towers and autonomous drones to the Pentagon. For Mr. X, war isn't a tragedy, it's an opportunity. And making him even more unpredictable, Mr. X isn't only motivated by money, he's also driven by ideology. This mix makes Mr. X dangerous. Money alone can buy influence, but money combined with conviction can buy wars. So how does a billionaire actually try to buy a war? With enough cash, Mr. X realizes he doesn't need to sit around and wait for events to happen. He can push America closer to war himself. The playbook is disturbingly simple. Think of it as a two-step operation. One part politics, one part propaganda. Step 1, install the right people. First, Mr. X has to get his pawns in place. So he bankrolls the candidates who will carry his hawkish worldview into Washington. In 2016, casino owner Sheldon Adelson cut a $35 million check to a Trump-aligned super PAC and poured over $200 million more into Republican congressional races. He wasn't alone either. Hedge fund titan Paul Singer became one of the top backers of Senator Tom Cotton, one of the Senate's most vocal advocates for preemptive strikes against Iran. Cotton openly argued that the US should bomb Iran's nuclear facilities now rather than later. Mr. X couldn't have written a better script. And when Adelson grew frustrated with National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, whom he saw as too cautious, he reportedly financed the media and advocacy efforts to oust him. Within months, McMaster was out, and John Bolton, a hawk who had spent years advocating for regime change in Iran, was in. This first move gets you power. The second keeps it. Step 2, fund the narrative. Getting the right people into position is only half the battle. To keep them there, Mr. X needs a steady drumbeat of justification. A narrative that convinces Washington elites and the American public that confrontation is inevitable. So he funds the ideas, millions flow into think tanks like the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD. On paper, FDD is an independent policy institute. According to public 990 filings and investigative reports, it's significantly funded by Adelson, Singer, and Home Depot co-founder Bernard Marcus. According to donor rolls, by 2011, Marcus had given over $10.7 million to FDD, covering 1/3 of its budget, and Singer about $3.6 million. That money underwrote research papers, op-eds, and TV appearances from quote-unquote experts who all seemed to agree Iran was a threat, and only sanctions, or strikes, could stop it. Adelson himself once said, only half-jokingly, that the US should drop an atomic weapon in Iran's desert as a quote-unquote warning shot. Radical, at least by mainstream diplomatic standards. But with millions behind the message, such ideas moved from the fringe to the mainstream. Step 1 installs the people. Step 2 manufactures the narrative. Put them together, and Mr. X has a machine capable of steering America toward war. And it works. Within just a few years, the US foreign policy establishment shifted from diplomacy to brinkmanship. Not because the American people demanded it, not because the facts required it, but because billionaires paid for it. Remember where the story began? This playbook isn't theoretical. It was tested in one of the most dangerous geopolitical flashpoints of the 21st century, Iran. In 2015, after years of tense negotiations, world powers struck the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the Iran nuclear deal. Under the agreement, Iran agreed to strict limits on its nuclear program. International inspectors from the IAEA verified that Iran was complying. Uranium stockpiles were reduced, centrifuges dismantled, enrichment capped. For the first time in decades, the risk of a nuclear-armed Iran seemed contained. But to Mr. X, and to his real-world counterparts like Adelson, Marcus, and Singer, This wasn't a triumph, it was a betrayal. Seeking revenge, when the 2016 US election rolled around, the billionaire checkbooks opened. Sheldon Adelson alone funneled over $100 million into Republican campaigns. It was one of the largest single political donations on record at the time. His expectations were clear. Any administration he supported would have to walk away from the Iran deal. And that's exactly what happened. Within 2 years, the new administration announced it was pulling out of the agreement. Sanctions returned, harsher than before. The message to Iran was simple: comply or collapse. For Mr. X, it was step 1 of the playbook unfolding on the world stage. Rewind to when Mr. X started putting his pawns into place. He got his man John Bolton, who was a hawk and had spent years openly calling for regime change in Iran. Bolton had the president's ear, so naturally tensions escalated. Sanctions choked Iran's economy. Oil exports plummeted. Washington insiders began to openly discuss limited strikes as though they were chess moves, not acts of war. And then the playbook met reality, thousands of miles away in Iranian airspace. On June 20th, 2019, Iranian forces shot down a U.S. drone, claiming it had entered their airspace. The Pentagon pushed for retaliation. Bolton urged immediate strikes on Iranian military sites. Inside the White House, meetings stretched into the night. Generals outlined the plan. Fighter jets were scrambled and bombers prepared to take off. The operation was greenlit. America was minutes away from unleashing an attack that could have triggered a regional war. And then, at the last moment, the president called it off. He'd been told that around 150 Iranians could die in the initial wave of strikes and called it off because, in his own words, "I didn't think it was proportionate." John Bolton was reportedly disgusted by the reversal. The Pentagon stood down and the jets turned back. The world exhaled, but the questions lingered. How did we get this close? And many were asking as well, did Sheldon Adelson just buy a war with Iran? We may never know how much influence those donations carried in the Oval Office, but for Mr. X, it was almost the perfect payoff. For the rest of us, it was almost the beginning of another endless war. Mr. X wasn't acting alone. He had allies, fellow billionaires who shared his vision and, in some cases, his obsessions. Together, they didn't just spend money. They built an echo chamber so loud that it drowned out nearly every other voice in Washington. First, there was Paul Singer, the hedge fund titan. His business empire was built on aggressive plays, earning him the nickname the vulture capitalist, for buying distressed debt and squeezing governments for repayment. But in politics, his reputation was different. Pro-Israel, bomb Iran. Then there was Bernard Marcus, co-founder of Home Depot. Unlike Singer, Marcus wasn't subtle. He called Iran the devil and made no secret of his desire to see the regime toppled. Together, Singer, Marcus, and Adelson created an intellectual infrastructure designed to make war sound reasonable, even inevitable. By the time foreign policy debates reached the floor of Congress, the battle was already tilted. The loudest voices weren't the diplomats urging caution or the public demanding peace. They were the billionaires writing the checks. The story of Mr. X exposes a bigger truth. America doesn't need a single puppet master to stumble into war. The incentives built into the system make it inevitable. Politicians and generals move seamlessly through what's called the revolving door. One day, they're crafting defense policy at the Pentagon or in Congress. The next, they're collecting million-dollar salaries from the very defense contractors that benefited from those policies. During the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, the top 100 defense contractors sold $410 billion in arms. Many of those companies hired former officials as lobbyists, insiders who knew exactly how to work the system. For them, war wasn't just a mission, it was a career path. Take Raytheon, for example. Former Defense Secretary Mark Esper once sat on its board. Generals retire and then reappear in corporate boardrooms, advising on strategy that conveniently aligns with keeping Pentagon budgets sky high. When the people who wage wars can later profit from them, the incentive is clear. Never let the machine stop. The cycle doesn't stop with careers, it's fueled by cash. Defense companies spend tens of millions every year lobbying Congress, and those dollars have a single purpose: to make sure the flow of contracts never slows. In 2021, when Congress debated halting U.S. arms sales to Saudi Arabia, sales that directly fueled the humanitarian disaster in Yemen, defense contractors swarmed Capitol Hill. For weapons manufacturers, every new conflict is a new revenue stream. Peace isn't profitable. War is. Here's the kicker. Ordinary voters aren't demanding endless wars. In fact, they're often against them. Polls show that most Americans favored the Iran nuclear deal and wanted to wind down involvement in the Middle East. In 2021, all 85 members of Congress who voted to cut the defense budget won re-election. Cutting Pentagon spending wasn't political suicide, it was popular. And yet the defense budget keeps growing. Why? Because in Washington, voter preferences are background noise. The signal that matters comes from billionaire donors and corporate lobbyists. Even if Mr. X and his billionaire buddies walked away tomorrow, the gears would keep turning. Former politicians cash in, contractors lobby harder and harder, and billionaires amplify it all. The result is a self-sustaining system where war is always on the table, peace is always fragile, and the people paying the price are rarely the ones profiting. For Mr. X, this system was fertile ground. He didn't need to build the machine, he only needed to look at his playbook, and that might be the scariest part of all. Because when money writes the first draft of history, the rest of us are left living in its footnotes. If you enjoyed this unraveling, do me a favor, steal the like button's campaign funds and funnel them into your own dark money super PAC. Then subscribe for more dark financial stories every week. Thanks for watching.